We'll start with our own Dr. Dawn Salutes. Dr. Salutes earned her PhD in Fine Arts in Theater from Texas Tech University. She has also earned a Master of Arts degree in Theater from Bowling Green State University, a Master of Arts in Speech and Communication from Bob Jones University, and her Bachelor of Science from Bob Jones. Here at CSU, Dr. Salutes is an associate professor within our School of Arts and Sciences, teaching English and Communications. She also serves as the director of our theater. Before coming to CSU, Dr. Salutes was an assistant professor of theater at Cedarville University. She has extensive educational experience at all levels, including working at Texas Tech University, Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and institutions in Georgia, Ohio, South Carolina, and Guam. She's an accomplished actor, director, playwright, and designer, and she is passionate and artistic instructor who brings a unique perspective to the classroom. Welcome, Dr. Salutes, with me.
Thank you.
And we also have the privilege of hosting Dr. Joanna Kraus this week for our production. Dr. Kraus is a distinguished author and playwright. She's written numerous children's books and short stories, as well as 20 scripts, including the compelling play Remember My Name, which our theater department is currently producing. Her works have received a wide variety of awards. Dr. Kraus earned her Doctorate of Education from Columbia University in New York, her Master of Arts from UCLA in California, and her Bachelor of Arts from Sarah Lawrence College in New York. In addition to her previously mentioned degrees and accomplishments, Dr. Kraus is also a Professor Emeritus of Theater at the State University of New York College in Brockport, where she also served as a graduate coordinator of interdisciplinary arts for children's programs. Dr. Kraus travels throughout the United States and around the world, leading workshops, talkbacks, and reviews in curriculum and playwriting. She has extensive experience in reviewing children's books and coaching others in expanding their creativity and enhancing communication skills. Dr. Kraus has made the trip to be here with us from her residency in San Francisco, California. She is braving our winters here as she has joined us for some snow, but she's used to that, living in New York for a long time. And of course is here for the production of Remember My Name. So please join me in giving Dr. Kraus a warm welcome. So our format today is Ms. Cagley and I will be asking questions. We're not going to talk a whole lot. We're going to allow these two ladies to be the feature here. So Ms. Cagley, I'll go ahead and let you do the first one.
Alrighty, Dr. Kraus, we had, as Dr. Higley and I were talking about how we would start this off, would you please put this scene that we just watched into its context?
First of all, I want to thank the actors who did a wonderful job just now, and thank you for a beautiful introduction. Wish my family could hear it. So the story, I needed for the audience to know what was at stake. And of course, as many of you may know if you know any World War II history, many families wanted to stay together, but the reality was that those who separated had a better chance of surviving. So what I wanted to deal with is the difficulty for a mother to let her child, her 10-year-old little girl who's never, she's kind of sheltered, innocent, she's never been out alone after dark, and all of a sudden, the father is saying, we have to send her away to a place that they don't know at all. In my mind, you always do backstory, that the father had worked there as a young man, in summertime doing agricultural work. He knew where it was. He knew the village. He knew the kind of people they were, and so he had some. But it got too heavy to put all that into the first scene. But that I wanted him to be a strong, dynamic person. Who has a wonderful sense of humor. He says, you can either laugh or cry, and I choose to laugh. I wanted this kind of person because at the end of the play, he's a shell of a man. He's just been shattered. So this scene is to set the emotional tension and conflict of what it's like to send your child away to something that's totally unknown. I mean, they do not know what's going to happen, and they don't know what's going to happen to them, but they do know that in Paris, his business was taken away, his home was taken away, and all of this is, validated by historical accounts. But I wanted to fictionalize it to this family that loves each other very, very much, enough so they can send her away to live.
Thank you. And that kind of leads into why you wrote the play. And I know some of that plays into your own personal story as well. So would you fill us in on your backstory that helps us understand why you chose to write this play?
People ask me that, and I don't honestly, writing anything has to be something that it's a trigger. I think Henry James said it could be a woman fiddling with a pin on her sweater on the subway. I mean, something happens. And I had sort of a boyfriend, not really, but he was from France, from Paris, and the kind of young man who would send you Chanel No. 5 as a present, and all the girls in the dorm would say, "Who is he?" Kind of thing. And he had been not hidden in a bunker, but rather he had a phone number, a false name, and lived in a village and survived. And when I knew this little bit about Claude, and I dedicated the play to him, he survived, not without some emotional scars. However, this triggered my interest in knowing more. I was stunned by how much I did not know. My parents really sheltered me from a lot of information. And I was just a little kid, so I mean, there was a war over there. It didn't really impact me. But later on, when I was in college, and I began to do some research and begin to get interested, I was horrified by what I didn't know. So this was part of the background. But the other thing was, there is a tremendous amount of information about the horrors, about the evil, about the torture. There's Elie Wiesel's book, Night. There's, I'm trying to think of his name, and I just went blank, but the Italian writer who wrote about the concentration camps. And there's all this horrible information. I mean, horrible meaning that it really happened and to real people. But I was interested in what made somebody do the right thing. And I remember that Elie Wiesel once said, when he asked people, "How come you helped?" he said, the answer wasn't this long philosophical monologue. It was simply, it was the right thing to do. And he kept hearing that over and over. And I was interested, I may be leaping ahead, but I called it kitchen courage. Of course, during the war, most of the men were serving in the service of the military. And there were women there. And you either open the door or you close the door. I mean, you could be like Madame Remanot, who will do anything for a kilo of sugar. Or you could be like Madame Mabillère, who says she can be my husband's cousin who came to visit. She fudges. I mean, she could never say who Madeleine really was, because then both of them would be killed. And there was no question about that. So I was interested in what makes somebody courageous to do that. And my anthology, I'm not advertising, but just to tell you, I have an anthology called Women of Courage, and it's 5 plays, all of them illuminating people like Harriet Tubman, people who really risked their lives to help others. So that was part of my backstory, that I've always been interested in what makes somebody decide to do the right thing. It's not easy.
So, Dr. Salutes, let me ask you then, knowing what you knew about the play, and I know you had some connections with Dr. Kraus before you came to CSU, so why did you want to bring this play, this production, to our stage, and how does it fit in with your goals for what you want to accomplish with our theater department?
Okay, let me see if I can catch all of that. First of all, the reason that I wanted to do this play in this year, of course, yes, I was very familiar with Dr. Kraus's work, and she's a personal friend, and it's one of my favorite plays. But beside from all of that, this is the 75th year of anniversary of the end of the Holocaust. And I wanted to present something that would keep this generation remembering, not just knowing the story of Anne Frank. And of course, Anne Frank, she was a hero too, but we know that story. We don't know a lot of the stories of the kitchen courage and the people who did the right thing simply because it was right. And it occurred to me that you folks are the last generation that will have the opportunity to meet someone who was a survivor or a witness or a veteran who served in the war, or even a child who remembers the war from a child's point of view. You're the last ones who will get to actually meet those people. And I was hoping that you would remember always and be able to pass that knowledge on to your children.
Very good. Dr. Kraus, so you alluded to it a little bit, and I know you were not real intimately knowledgeable about what was going on in the war, but you were a child at that time. So what was the effect, what was the impact of you, even in later years as you became more aware of what your ancestry had gone through, and how did that affect you as growing up as a minority, so to speak, a Jewish young gal here in the United States, where we weren't necessarily that far ahead of the Europeans in our acceptance of the Jewish people? So talk a little bit about that and tell us what that was like.
Well, I grew up in Maine, which has a climate similar to yours, which is why I now live in California. But in any case, yes, it was a minority in Maine, and I remember sometimes kids were saying, "You don't belong here," that sort of thing. But it was very mild. There were certainly divisions from the Christian community and the Jewish community, from the white community, from the black community. There were divisions, but they were just invisible lines. There was no violence of any sort. It was mild. But I do know that I was telling Dr. Higley before, we had neighbors who lived, the house was as close as that first aisle. And for 7 years, they had nothing whatsoever to do with us. And which is fine. I mean, that's a bit of Maine. But after 7 years, they decided we were a nice family. And the mother came over with her hat on and her gloves, because in those days you did that. And she made a formal call on my mother, and my mother invited her in. And later I said to her, "Mom, she was too late." But there was that kind of discrimination. But I really didn't have any real horrible things happen at all. I mean, not at all. And so when I began doing a little bit of research, I was stunned by how much I didn't know. I mean, I guess every day you wake up and thinking, I'm so ignorant. I mean, there's so much to learn, and there's so much you don't know. And when you're 18, you think you know everything, right? But when you're my age, you realize you don't know everything, and there's a lot more. So I was on a quest to find out, but I really wanted to know what made people react the way they did. There is a wonderful book, a sociology book, but it reads like a novel, called The Altruistic Personality. And in it, Drs. Sam and Paul Olener they interviewed with a team of, I think, 600 interviewers, interviewed people as to why does somebody help others, or why does somebody not help others. And what they found out was that the person who does the right thing, as Madame Barbier does, and of course Père Antoine, is that there's somebody in their sphere maybe a parent, maybe a teacher, maybe a friend, who is liberal enough to say no to things that are obviously tyrannical and oppressive. And that having that in their sphere of circumstances allows them to think, well, maybe something isn't right here. So that the people who were, it's what they call the altruistic personality, because there are those that will help, though there are those who just are indifferent, which is many of us, and there are those who actively go along with the tyranny that's operative at the moment. So, and that's, I had to have that in the play, Madame Renaud. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not. No.
Certainly. And I know that you have a family.
Oh, yes.
So tell us about your family.
Oh, well, I am blessed. I have, my husband's no longer with us, which I'm sad. I'm sad that he couldn't be part of this wonderful weekend. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all your warmth and such polite young people. That's great. I love it. But I have an adopted son from Korea, and he came at age 8.5. And in a way, very much like Rochelle. I mean, he was put on a plane, 10,000 miles away was this long-nosed, white-faced lady, and he wanted nothing to do with her. So, I mean, it took 2 years before he accepted me, and finally I heard him say to one of his friends, "My mom's a teacher." I thought, oh, I made it. He said, "Mom," that kind of thing. He accepted my husband immediately because he wanted a father very badly, and they were buddies from the word go. So I now have, my son is now married with, he's Korean, but he married a Panamanian. So the children are gorgeous, of course. But anyway, so I have this lovely family. And the reason I'm in California was because he was in California going to school. But he's now living, I don't know if you know your geography, but California is a long state. So he lives down below Los Angeles, and I'm up near San Francisco. But we still manage to see each other a lot. And that's my family. And my son is very supportive of my work. And my family, my son and they're all Catholic. So we're kind of a really many ways multicultural together. And when he was at college, he said he was taking a course on the Holocaust. I said, I wrote a play about that. He said, "I know that, Mom." So anyway, so that's my wonderful, wonderful family. I feel blessed to have them.
So let me shift gears here a little bit, and I'll address this to both of you. So Dr. Dawn, I'll let you go first and give you a little break, Dr. Kraus. So the arts. You talk about some of these, natural discriminatory kind of things that we live in this world, and the arts is one place that we seem to be able to cross some lines and make some really good progress in helping to bring healing and reconciliation to these different divides. So talk to us about that. Why are the arts such a powerful tool, and how do you want to use those in that process?
I think, first of all, looking at the arts gives us a chance to echo our Creator. He created, his every effort is artistic. And when we do that, we are following in the footsteps of our Creator. But even further than that, art gives us a point where we can come together and we can look at something that is beautiful, that's true and honest and good. And a while back, I did a study on art of remembrance, such as the Vietnam Memorial and as the Lincoln Memorial. And they're beautiful works of art that we look at and we look back and we remember what's gone before. And then we come to the art of theater, and I see theater as an art where you're not just looking back, you're an eyewitness to what's going on. You're a part of the art. Even if you're sitting silently in your seat, there's no such thing as being passive about theater. Even if you don't clap, you're not passive. You're a participant in the events that are taking place. So, of course, I think theater is one of the best arts of all. And of course, right along beside that is the music that stirs our hearts and our emotions toward that remembrance.
That's beautifully put, yeah. On the stage, it is always now. Unlike a movie or television, or you can turn it off. The theater, there's a magical, there's a line, there's a link between the audience and the performer. And there's something electric about that experience. And I grew up in children's theater. My first role was Lazyfoot, was a lazy elf, I think, or something like that. But anyway, I remember I was smitten from the beginning. I wanted to do theater. I don't think there's any other form that quite captures an audience the way theater can. And with a child audience or young people, for a playwright, it's almost like a testing ground. If the kids are bored, boy, do they let you know. And they're not polite about that. And yet, if they are involved, it's 100%. And I remember once, I have a play called The Ice Wolf, and the hunters are hunting this child who's been transformed into a wolf. And at one point, the hunter says, "Look, fresh tracks." The whole audience turned to look. And I thought, it's working, it's working. So there's that kind of excitement. People have often asked me, well, why do you write for young people? I said, because I think they deserve the best. And also, as John and I have discussed, you are building a future audience. But the theater, I believe, has something that no other art form has, which is the ability to capture you. If the actors are good and the show is working, you're right there in the palm of their hands, and palms, I should say. And it's a phenomenal experience. And for a writer, there's something very exciting about seeing an audience swept up into the words that you wrote. So that, that's the ego boost. Or the deflation, depending on what it is. But the theater has the capacity to move people, to teach them without their realizing that they're being taught. But it can transform you. And I know I've been to plays where, you come out of the theater and you're still there. And I remember once seeing Nicholas Nickleby done by the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, and it was one of those shows that they did a performance in the afternoon and then the dinner break, and then there was the rest of the show. Well, all during dinner, I said to my husband, I want to go back, I want to see. He said, honey, they're having dinner too. So, I was just so caught up in the story. And that's what can happen with live theater.
Yeah. And speaking of theater, what are you working on now?
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, right now I have my son and I did a memoir together called O Little Ham of Buffalo, and I will have to explain that. And it's a Korean adoption memoir. This is a short book, but right now I'm trying to market it a bit. And it's published by Mirror Publishing. But in any case, this was the story of him coming to America to the point of the legal adoption. And while I wrote it, it was based on a lot of interviews with him. The title is because, I have to explain this because people say, what was the name of that book again? And when he didn't speak any English. And when he was learning English, and he was preparing for the holiday concert at his school, I heard him singing very loudly. He was practicing, "Oh, little ham of Buffalo." I said, honey, the words are, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem." He said, "Oh." You know? So when I asked my writing critique group, what should I call the book, they said, that's obvious, you know? So right now, so I'm marketing that. I've just finished a short, a chapter book called, it's called The Blue Jeans Rebellion, and it's based on some Utah Mormon history. And I'm beginning to work on a play that has to do with, in a sports situation, about bullying. So that's where I am.
All right, so we are closely getting out of time here. So I'm going to have one last question and ask both of you to address this. Going back to our play, Remember My Name. So, Dr. Kraus, Dr. Saluz, what did you learn unexpectedly, or what did you take from in your writing and your production of it? What are some lessons that you did not expect to learn as you went, started that process? And we'll leave that as kind of the last word today, and then I'll conclude after that. So go ahead. Oh.
Boy, this is not the first time I've directed this play. And so I was not really expecting to learn anything new. And yet, I had done research with each production that I did of this play, and I think the thing that I learned on this is that these characters, even though Dr. Kraus has said they're fictional, but they are based on real people, and at heart, they are real people. And watching this particular group of actors bringing them to life, I thought, as players, we call ourselves kindred hearts players, but looking at these characters, I think they also are kindred hearts. And because so many, it tells the story of those who did the right thing.
Beautifully put, thank you. I did learn a lot, and I worked hard to come to some terms myself. Not every German was a Nazi, and there were, I didn't want there were times during World War II movies where, they portray, the one was stereotypical. I thought, no, I want to show you that this young man was educated. He had a certain amount of charm. If you didn't know his politics and his prejudices, you might be very taken with him. And I wanted that kind of a character, because I wanted to show that it wasn't just ignorant brutes. There were people that you might have had at your dinner table. So I thought that was important, and I likened in my mind some of the southern plantation owners who did horrible things, but if you met them socially and didn't know all this, you might be very attracted to them. And I thought that was important to know, that that evil doesn't always have a visibly ugly face, and that's important. I also wanted you to know that it was a struggle for Madame Barbier to take on, she had lost her husband, she didn't want any more trouble, she was an elderly woman, that this was a great spurt of courage on her part to finally take the little girl in, and almost is like a daughter to her. That the people had, many people had, you say, because I remember thinking, how can a mother give a child away? But there are circumstances where you do it not because you don't like the child, but because you love the child so much. And so there was all that going on. It made me think, what would I have done? Supposing I had been in the situation of Madame Barbier, would I have opened my door, or would I have pretended I wasn't home? And then on the other side, what if I had been Madeleine? What then? Would people have taken me in? Would they have shunned me? I do know once, this is just something that, parenthetical, but when I was at a couple of campuses for the State University, and at one point at New Paltz, the Albany cut 400 people, and I was in the last 5. And I remember the dean called me. I had been up for tenure, and I'd been accepted, but I hadn't been passed, and that's an easy time to let someone go. And he was crying. And all I could think of was, this must be a terrible call for him to have to make. I was in shock. And I remember my son after soccer, wanted ice cream. I said, there'll be no more ice cream, like I'd lost my job. And I remember I had a year to go. I mean, they knew that I was going to be let go, but I had a year. And I was shunned because people didn't want to have anything to do with someone who had been let go, even though it was a political move. And then I went to another campus, and I was there forever. But it taught me that people can be very scared of someone whom they may think is tainted for whatever reason. So I thought, I have to, put that into the play, into the mix as I'm writing. Much of what you write doesn't make it to the final version. I mean, there was a whole speech where Leon tells what happened to him, and then I thought, this is just too heavy, too weighty, and I decided, he just says, I can't tell you. And I was kind of torn because I knew what he was thinking, but I just felt it was too much in that moment. So I guess that answers the question.
And if I could add on, I loved what you said about each person's willingness and their different ways of making sacrifices. And to me, that's just example after example after example of sacrificial love.
We will close with that. So 2 things I'd like to say before we're done officially. First of all, I want to thank all you folks. You've been a great audience these last 3 days and honored us with your attention. So thank you so much for allowing us to do something very different than what we normally do here in Chapel. And of course, I want to invite all of you to the production tonight or Saturday evening. If you do not have your tickets, Miss Kristen is back there. You can get those, and I think you can get some at the door as well. So if you don't, if you're available, I encourage you to come on out and to support your colleagues who are involved in that. And then, of course, finally, I want to thank Dr. Salutes and Dr. Kraus for your time today and for all the work and effort that you put in to this play. So thank you very much. Let's thank them together. And you are dismissed.